In the lesson that we're going to talk about today, we are going to learn about point-slope form of a linear equation. If we look, the point-slope form of a linear equation will look like this. And the reason why it's called point-slope form is because it gives us the slope and it gives us a point. X1, Y1 is a point. We can put them together to make that point. And of course, just like slope-intercept form, M is going to represent slope. Let's look at this example right here. I have point-slope form written for you here in yellow. So let's pay attention here. We can identify the slope and a point when we are given equations in point-slope form. And if we look, M is going to be 7, so our slope is 7. And we always want to check. Right here is the minus sign, so this should be a minus sign, and they are. And so therefore, x sub 1 is going to be 4. Check for a minus sign. We have minus signs, so y sub 1 is 2. Looking down here at the next one, actually I want to skip that one. Let's go to the next one below that, the green one. If we look here, this just says y is equal to, 2 and then x minus 6 inside the parentheses. It's actually in slope-intercept form, or I'm sorry, it's in point-slope form, because it says y minus 0 on the left side of the equal sign. And so if we notice, 2 is going to be our slope. We have a minus sign, so x1 is positive 6. We have a minus sign, y sub 1 is 0. So that is what we have. I want you to identify the slope and the given point of the other two equations that we haven't worked with yet. Go ahead and pause the video and I'll work those solutions out in one moment. Here in the second one, this is m, it is the slope, -5, and x sub 1, there's a minus sign there, so x sub 1 is a positive 2. Y sub 1, there's a minus sign, so y sub 1 is a positive 1. And looking at the last one, the number in front of the parentheses is the slope, and so we don't see a number there, but we do know that the number 1 is there. Looking here, there's a minus sign, so x sub 1 is 8. Looking at y sub 1, it has a minus sign in front of it, so y sub 1 is a positive 3. And those are the slopes and the given points of those four equations. We're going to move on to the next one here, and we notice something a little bit different because it says y plus 2 in the first one. Now, looking at the very top, remember there's a minus sign in front of x1 and y1. And so when you come down to this first equation and it says y plus 2, you should have a little alert going off inside your head telling you that that doesn't necessarily fit the point-slope form of an equation, so you need to think about it a little bit to come up with the given point. So let's go ahead and work with this. Let's identify the slope. The slope is going to be in front of the parentheses here, which there's no number there, so we know it's a 1. And let's look at x1. It has a minus sign in front of it, so the 4 is going to be positive. But let's come over here to y plus 2. What's y plus 2? Well, the point-slope form of equation says we're supposed to have a minus sign there, and we have a plus sign there. So how can we use a minus sign to make a plus sign? Well, if we say y minus negative 2, y minus negative 2 is the same thing as y plus 2. So therefore, now we have a minus sign, and that right there is going to be y sub 1. And we'll write that in the right side of the ordered pair. So looking here, the slope is 1. The point that is given is 4, negative 2. Coming down to the next example, identify the slope, negative 1/2. And let's look at this sign. Well, it's not a minus sign, so we know in our head that x plus 9 is the same thing as x minus negative 9. So therefore, we do have a minus sign now because the point-slope form of an equation says we are supposed to have a minus sign in between x and x sub 1. So therefore, x sub 1 is negative 9. Let's look over here at y sub 1. Y sub 1 has a plus sign in front of it, so we should be thinking that if it has a plus sign, it's the same as minus and negative. So now that it has a minus sign with it, this is y sub 1. Looking here at the third example, we don't have a parentheses. Point-slope form says we're supposed to have a parentheses, but we don't have one here. What is actually happening is negative 3/4 is outside the parentheses, and it says x minus 0 inside the parentheses. Because if we have negative 3/4 times whatever the difference of x and 0 is, well, x minus 0 is just going to give us x, and negative 3/4 will be outside the parentheses. But negative 3/4 times x, you don't exactly need those parentheses there, so we just have negative 3/4 x, and if you look back to the original equation, that's what is written. And we have y plus 6 on the left side. So I want you to take a few moments to figure out the slope and the given point of these two equations. Go ahead and fill those in, and then check your solutions here in one moment. You might want to pause the video. Okay, looking here, negative 3/4 is going to be our slope. There's a minus sign, so x sub 1 is 0. There's a plus sign, so this is y minus negative 6. So now we have a minus sign. X sub 1 is negative 6. Looking at the last example, m is in front of the parentheses. It's going to be 0.75. 0.75. And we have a minus sign in front of x sub 1, so x sub 1 is positive 12. We have a plus sign in front of y sub 1, so we got to think of it differently. Y minus negative 3, we have a minus sign now, so y sub 1 is negative 3. That's a key part when you do point slope form, is that you pay attention to the signs in front of x sub 1 and y sub 1. They should be a minus sign. And if it's not, if it's an addition sign, then you have to think about it differently, as, you know, addition is minus and negative. Moving on. Sometimes they're just going to tell you to write the equation. Like in this first example, the orange example, it says write the equation of a line in point slope form that has a slope of -2 and passes through the point 2, 3. Well, we have slope, which is the letter M, and we have a point, a given point, which is going to be x1 and y sub 1. So let's go ahead and write this equation. We're going to write the slope right below M. The slope from our problem says it's -2. And then we're going to have x minus x sub 1. On the left side, we're going to have y minus y sub 1. And there you go. We have the equation written in point slope form of a line that passes through -2, has a point 2, 3. Looking at the bottom example, we have to do the same thing. We have to write the equation in point slope form. It's going to have a slope of 1/4, and it's going to pass through this point, -4, +1. So first off, we put the slope in, 1/4. And then we're going to say x minus x sub 1, which is -4. That's going to be equal to y minus y sub 1, which is 1. Now we should clean this up a little bit. We know this part right here is the part that we clean up, so we're going to leave the left side the same. Slope is still 1/4. Now let's clean up x minus -4. When you minus a negative number, it becomes a plus. And so your final equation should look like this. Your final equation in point slope form should look like what I have circled. So let's move on to the next two. You take a few moments to try these two on your own, and then I will work through those in one moment. You might want to pause the video right now. Okay, this one has a slope of 4/3, and there's the given point. So it's y minus y sub 1, which is going to be -2. So I'm just going to write, actually we'll write it like this for now. Y minus y sub 1. The slope is 4/3, and then it's x minus x sub 1. This will be the last time that I write the equations out like this, because from now on I'll just start putting +2 there, because minus and negative becomes +2, and minus and negative here becomes +6. So this is what we have. Y plus 2 is equal to 4/3, and then x plus 6 inside parentheses. That's how I'll start writing the equations from now on. Looking here, has a slope of -3 and passes through the point 0, 4. So y minus y sub 1 is equal to the slope, and then x minus x sub 1. We're going to clean this up a little bit. We're going to simplify. X minus 0 is just x. And so this is the equation of the line that has a slope of -3 and passes through the point 0, 4. Let's look at this example. It says, write the equation of a line in point-slope form that passes through the points 2, 3, and negative 4, 1. Well, if we go back to this example here, the previous one, if we look, we were given the slope and 1 point. That's a little bit different than what we have here. We're actually given 2 points in this problem. We need the slope and we need only 1 point. So if you're given 2 points, you can easily find the slope by using the slope formula. Now that we're looking here, we have the slope formula written down, so let's go ahead and plug in some values for slope. We're going to say y sub 2 minus y sub 1 and x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Let's go ahead and work this out. 1 minus 3 is negative 2, and negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. Let's reduce. We know negative divided by negative will give us a positive, and reduce each one of these numbers by 2. 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. So slope for this line is 1/3. Now we can have 2 equations here. They will look different, but they will represent the same line. So for our first equation, let's use 2, 3 as our given point. So 2 is going to be x1 and 3 is going to be y1. So here is the point slope form of an equation. And we just plug in the values that we have. Slope is 1/3. X minus x sub 1, which is 2, and y minus y sub 1, which is 3. And that'll be the equation in point slope form that passes through those 2 points. Now we have another ordered pair in 4, 1, or negative 4, 1, that we can use that point to write in an equation also. So that'll be x1 and that'll be y1. So let's go ahead and plug some values in. We're still going to have a slope of 1/3. X minus x sub 1, which is negative 4. So x minus negative 4 becomes x plus 4. And y minus y sub 1, which is 1. So you have 2 equations here. 2 equations that represent the same line on the graph. They just give you different information. They give you the same slope and they give you a different point. Right here, write the equation of a line in point slope form that passes through the points 8, negative 4, 6, negative 6. Let's go ahead and work through this one together. We're going to say y sub 2 minus y sub 1. X sub 2 minus x sub 1. We're going to work this out. So if we look on the top, we have minus and negative. We know that when we minus a negative, it becomes plus. So negative 6 plus 4 becomes negative 2. And 6 minus 8 is also negative 2. And we know this reduces to become 1. So let's write the equation. We're going to use 8, negative 4 first. So y minus negative 4 becomes y plus 4. The slope is 1, so I'm not going to write it in front of the parentheses, but we know it's there. And then we're going to have x minus 8. And there's one equation that we have. Let's look at the second point. 6, negative 6. Let's go ahead and plug it in to the point slope form. Y minus negative 6 becomes y plus 6. We're going to put the 1 in front of the parentheses, the invisible one, and then we're going to have x minus 6. And so there's our two equations. If we were to graph those, they would represent the same line, would be the same exact line, but there's just a couple different ways to write them. Actually, there's numerous ways to write them. When we write equations, in the next few examples, you'll see that. All right, this next example here, go ahead and pause the video and try this one on your own. Two minus negative 7 becomes 2 plus 7. And 2 minus negative 4 becomes 2 plus 4. Work this out, we get 9 over 6. We can divide each one of them by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So m is equal to 3 over 2. Let's go ahead and write one of the equations. I'm going to use negative 4, negative 7. So y minus negative 7 is equal to, here's the slope, and x minus negative 4. There's one of the equations. In the second equation, we're going to use 0.22. So y minus 2 is equal to the slope and x minus 2. And there's the other equation. When you're given 2 points, you can write two equations in point slope form. Another example for you to try on your own. We look here, the slope, 5 minus 5, and 3 minus negative 1 becomes 3 plus 1. We're going to get 0 over 4, and we know if 0 is on the top, it has a slope of 0. Looking at this, this should be a horizontal line. Horizontal lines have a slope of 0, so let's use this first point here. Y minus 5 is equal to the slope of 0 and x minus negative 1. And we know that 0 times all that inside is going to give us 0. Get y by itself, add 5 to both sides, so y is equal to 5. And there is our horizontal line. Sometimes you get things that look like this. If you were to plug in this other point here, 3, 5, you're going to come up with y equals 5 also. Now let's look at this graph. Looking at this graph, we have the green line on the graph, on the coordinate plane, and it wants us to write the equation of a line in point slope form. So in order to write it in point slope form, we need a point and we need the slope. Well, we can calculate slope by finding 2 points where it crosses the grid lines exactly. And those are 2 points where it exactly crosses the grid line. So m is equal to the change in y over the change in x. So the change in y, how do we get from the point down here up? Well, we go up 4, which is a positive number. And we're going to go left 2, which is negative. We know positive divided by a negative is going to give us a negative. And 4 over 2 gives us 2. As stated before, we only need a point, but if we look, we have lots of points. Point there, one of the ones we use for slope. There's the y-intercept. So which point are we supposed to use? It doesn't really matter which point you use, you're still going to get the equation that represents the green line. But when we do this, we should all use the same point. That way we're getting the same answer here. Let's go ahead and use this point we used for slope. What is the ordered pair there? Well, the ordered pair would be, it went to the right one, which is positive, and then it went down 1, 2, 3. So that's a -3. So we're going to use that as our ordered pair. So we're going to say y minus y sub 1, which is -3, so this becomes a plus 3, is equal to the slope, and then x minus x sub 1, which is 1. And there's one of the equations in point slope form that represents that green line. Let's look at this one right here. Let's go ahead and pick a couple points so we can find a point and a slope. So in order to find the slope, we see it's crossing down here and probably right there. We notice that it's also crossing at these places. But I'm just going to go ahead and do my calculations from those 2 points. So the slope is change in y over change in x. The change in y. From here, we're going up 1, 2, 3, which is a positive number. And then we went to the right 1, 2, which is also a positive number. So the slope of 3/2. We're going to need a point to write in an equation, so let's go ahead and use the point that we used for finding the slope. This ordered pair, we went 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left, so that was a -4, and we went down 2, down 2. And so let's go ahead and write the equation for that. Y minus y sub 1. Y sub 1 is -2. We'll put our slope in there, and then we say x minus x sub 1, which is -4. So x minus -4 becomes x plus 4. And now you have an equation in point slope form of the line that is graphed. I'm going to have you go ahead and try this one on your own. We need to pick a point that we all are going to have in our equation. So let's go ahead and pick this point right here. Go ahead and use that point to write your equation. So you're going to need to find the point and the slope and write the equation. So go ahead and Go ahead and do that. Pause the video, and I'll work that out in one moment. Looking right there, there's another point where it crosses the grid lines exactly. So we're going to find the slope. Change in y over change in x, so it goes down 1. And it's going to go to the right 1, 2, 3. Goes to the right 3. Now the ordered pair for the green point. This ordered pair, we start at the origin, and we say 1, 2, 3, 4 is the x coordinate, and down 1 is the y coordinate, -1. So now let's write that equation. Y minus -1 becomes y plus 1, the slope of -1/3, and x minus 4. There should be your equation. Let's look here at the next one. I'm going to have you do this one on your own, but you need to pay special attention because it does not cross right here at 0, 0. If you look closely, that line is just above the origin. So let me help you find some points here. It crosses, there's the x-intercept, and there. All these blue points will help you find the slope. And which one are we going to use to write our equation? Let's use this green one way out here. So use the green one to write your point slope form of a linear equation. First off, you need to find the slope. So I'm going from here to the green point. So that means if we change in y, it means we go up 1, +1. And change in x, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the slope is going to be 1/4. The green point here is going to have a value 7, 2. So that's the ordered pair for the green point. And now we're going to write our equation in point slope form. Y minus y sub 1. There's your slope. And x minus x sub 1. And there's the final equation for the line that is graphed. That'll be all we have for this video. Thank you for tuning in.